All right. Thanks, Karen. This is, I think, going to be a great webinar. I'm Sarah McNamara. I am Senior Marketing Operations Manager at Cloudera. I love everything marketing operations, sales operations, marketing technology, and I have probably the most amazing panel I could think of with me. So I'll go ahead and let Jill introduce herself.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I'm super excited to be here today. I, like Sarah, love all things MarTech, marketing operations, demand gen, ABM, and also sales enablement. I say I'm a sales professional. I was born sales. I was bred marketing. My buyer has been marketing for nearly 2 decades, and I bleed customer. I'm so excited to talk about data and process and operations and technology and people today with the esteemed group of panelists.
All right, awesome. Adam, Mr. Sithrock and Mr. Drift, let us know your background.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be talking with this group. Like Sarah, I love this crew and learn a lot from you guys, so excited to be here with you. I work at Drift, and I'm the VP of Strategy there. I was formerly founder and CEO at Sithrock, which was acquired by Drift. So I've been working in this whole MarTech world for about 12 years or so, and I love it. I love all things sales and marketing, so super excited to talk about some of these topics. And I just learned that Guillaume has not taken off his not put on his shoes for like 10 days. And I know we're all in a similar situation being at home. So it's nice to be, interacting with some people here through this webinar.
I feel like he's in like a Call of Duty map or something right now with his background.
His background is putting us to shame.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey everyone, this is G. Thanks for the intro. I'm trying to break the record here, and I think I'd like to encourage everyone to break the record of not putting on your outdoor shoes for as long as possible. That business being taken care of very quickly. I actually had the chance of working with Adam at Drift for a year, so I was VP of Growth there. Prior to that, I was VP of Growth at Segment. And held multiple growth roles at B2B SaaS startups, which is, I'd say, my core industry. And these days, I do growth advisories at multiple successful startups, including G2 Crowd, Intellimise, Metadata, and a couple of others. My passion, I'd say, is bringing great experiences to customers on the top of the funnel. And I'm super excited to be with this fantastic group so we can talk about how we can create fantastic experiences for our customers and our future customers.
All right, awesome. So we are going to start out with what we call rapid fire. And it basically means we're going to answer it in less than a minute. So we're going to try to keep it as succinct as possible, which is going to be interesting because I feel like all of us on here are very opinionated and very long-winded. But we're going to start with rapid fire. Is last touch attribution dead? I'll go ahead and start. I hope so. I don't understand the science behind it. I think it's just kind of like throwing something at a wall and hoping that that's the correct answer. And the reason is because people really go through like more of like a journey map. It's not a straight line. And so when you actually talk to someone about what influenced them, it can be, that Instagram ad 3 months ago that could have initially caught their attention, and then over time they're being nurtured. So I think that that's pretty limited, and I think that we're kind of getting there in terms of trying to figure out how we can use machine learning and other technologies to understand, okay, what really is a likely path, and try to get it to more of a perfect science. What do you think, Adam?
So I'll give sort of 2 answers to this. One, you said I have 10 minutes to answer, right?
No, 1 minute.
I think that if you're in a growth or scaling company, I would say it's dead. And probably given the uncertainty in our economy and our environment right now, multi-touch and accurate attribution models are like more important than ever if you're in kind of a more mature business that's growing, that's scaling, because you have a lot of things now that you can't do. Like you probably aren't doing a lot of direct mail. You can't do your events as you were planning. And so you have to simplify and focus on the things that are working. And how are you going to do that if you can't get accurate attribution? So I do think in those scenarios, it's that last to dead and sort of multi-touches where most companies are going. But I do think now, like if you're in the very early stage, I think just any signal, right? Like you don't need sophisticated models if you have a team of 1 or 2 marketers and you're just trying to survive right now or just get something going. In my experience at SiftRock, we did very little attribution. We did a lot of just, polling opportunities and asking closed-won customers how they found us, and it worked fine in those very early days. So that would be my one qualifier to saying it's dead.
All right. How about G? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to focus on the question of like last touch and why it was dead. It would be dead. And so I'm obviously French, which means I'm Latin, and I come from a country which likes to let's say bend the rules a lot. And one thing I can say is that last touch attribution is something which is very easy to cheat on, I would say. If I'm a marketer and you're measuring my performance based on last touch attribution, I am going to blast those customers with emails, and I'm going to get 100% of that revenue. Right? Am I creating value? Debatable, right? And so in that sense, like it could be a good thing to look at. The problem, it's the wrong thing to measure people on. And that's why it's probably not effective.
What's interesting is I actually often see when I dig into Salesforce and look at reporting, I do often see salespeople as well hopping in and being like, oh yeah, it was when I met them in person. That, I'll see some manual adjustment taken there. So that definitely, I see that happening. What do you think, Jill?
Yeah, I think it's been dead for a while. I think there have been technologies that have been available for quite some time that help marketing and sales really measure the accurate view of just the sheer number of different touches that are required to get the buyer and the buying committee all through that journey of the buying process. So, I mean, I spent 10 years at Eloqua and then a year at Marketo, and I was there when we acquired Visible, which was one technology that helps marketing measure attribution. I also just had a call, in fact, yesterday with the CEO and founder of an early stage startup called Infinigrow, and they're out of Israel. And their approach to this is making it much more simple and yet flexible to be able to measure the multitude of touches across marketing and sales and across that buyer journey, not just at an individual contact level, but at that aggregate account level. So the technologies are there today that we don't have to rely on dated approaches of first touch, last touch. Really, I think it is important that you look at every touch in the buyer's journey that gets them farther along in their buying process. And someone mentioned that direct mail is challenged right now. I actually see it differently. And I know that the concern is sending stuff to offices where people aren't currently residing. But I'm part of a venture capital fund, Stage 2 Capital, and disclosure, we're an investor in Sendoso. And Sendoso actually just announced a new work from home feature, whereas the sender can notify the recipient that a package is on the way, and the recipient can decide to have it delivered to their home address. So what's really cool about what I'm seeing in the MarTech space is companies evolving very quickly to meet the needs of the current environment that we find ourselves in today.
Cool. Yeah, I know at Cloudera, we have been using machine learning, and we have amazing data scientists who are able to try to get a sense of what the customer journey is like. And what they ultimately found was that there was no like one, journey, that really it's like a directional thing. It's like you get a directional view of what is the most effective and then try to go from there. So I think all of those reasons that we've summarized are pretty great reasons as to why last touch is dead. All right, next. Oh boy, we have some drift folks on here. Gated or ungated? I'm going to pass this to G.
Yeah, it's easy. For me, this one is easy. I think there could have been a case for that question like a couple of years back. Like, you got to understand, like, why did we gate content? We gated content to capture leads because we needed those email addresses to reach out to people, right? And there's two things that make this irrelevant now. One, that you actually can get the email addresses somewhere else. You can buy them, you can go to a service to think people, like I want to shout out to Clearbit, which are a great partner, and like you can get those email addresses, right? Two, the performance of following up on a piece of content after a download is actually abysmal, right? So you'd better like engage them with something valuable on the spot rather than trying to say, hey, thanks for downloading this PDF like last week, like should we have a demo? Especially because most of the ebooks are unrelated to the product, right? So like it doesn't mean people have the intention to buy a product. So it's completely, I'm all for ungated these days.
Ditto.
Yes, definitely.
I think what happened with the gating is marketers got drunk on MQLs, marketing qualified leads, and putting that gate in front of a valuable or not piece of content became the way to be able to increase the number of MQLs that they were able to report to marketing leadership and to the board, which MQL is a leading indicator. It isn't really a true measure of revenue. And so I think also as we've looked at how do we be more intentional and how do we be more focused on the ideal customer profile, our ICP, and directing our dollars, our marketing and sales dollars to the set of accounts that look like the ones that we can make very, very successful, the ungating will continue to see companies get more brave around ungating their content.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think we all agree on this. I would just add that if you're having trouble making this case internally or you're having trouble going to ungated, the big paradigm shift in the world that I think you can't deny is the shift from a world where supply is constrained in terms of vendors, in terms of content, in terms of all these things online, to a world where there is infinite supply. So from the end buyer or your customer's perspective, there's no reason for them to ever to ever go through a gate because there is so much supply in the world now. There are, in every category, every G2 crowd grid is just filled with vendors. Every kind of piece of content you're creating, there is some alternative. So I think the macro trend there, it's just, if you are still gating, your customers, your consumers, your audience, they'll go somewhere else because there is so much supply and nobody wants to jump through those hoops.
That said, Sarah, I continue to be presented gates and gates to content that I really actually want to download. And I continue to be presented with the same blank form for the same piece of content that I want to download multiple times because I'm either on my Mac or I'm on my desktop or I'm on my mobile device. And that is a very frustrating experience that I get the same blank form for the same piece of content. I really encourage marketers to rethink and invest in better technology and process to think about it through the lens of the customer, of the potential customer, of the partner, of the employee who's actually trying to download your white paper so that she can be more knowledgeable about your offerings. Like ungating is something that we need to see more of.
Yeah, I think something
and I just
that's
want to take sorry, Sarah. I just want to take I see in the Q&A, I have Angela who asks a question, and I know Angela, so I want to answer her question immediately. She asked, what do you measure if not form fills? If we all agree on ungated, what's the measurement, right? I can give you my answer. My answer is I measure the engagement. So I look at how many qualified companies, and so I do like IP detection and stuff like that. You could use a chatbot like Drift. There's like multiple ways. I measure the engagement. I also try to measure like the time spent on this content, right? And so ideally, like you stop having PDFs, which you can't measure. You have it on like other kinds of like modern formats, so you can measure the time spent. Are they really engaging? Like, can you split in multiple pages? Can you do like videos? How much of the videos have they watched? Are they right kind of companies? And if it's the right kind of company and they're spending like 10, 15, 20 minutes on the content, success. By all measures, success.
Yeah, and I think even if you do have forms, something that people often forget about is a strategy behind it. I think forms are often viewed almost as emails. It's like, oh, just throw a form on there, just throw out an email. And so that's where, like Joe, like you said, you see a lot of I see some really ugly forms out there. Like when I did some research on ABM platforms, and even for the, you think that as MarTech, as an ABM vendor, that they would have, their forms in stellar shape if they're going to force us to fill out a form. But some of them, you could tell they just took the HTML from one of the marketing automation platforms, just threw it on there without a thought. So I think that definitely is something, even if your company isn't quite to the point where you're able to totally shift away from forms, at least put some thought into, the user experience as someone going to those forms.
Especially the mobile user experience.
Yes. All right. Now we're going to go to a regular question, and that is, what simple changes can marketing and sales teams make and how they work together to drive more revenue? I'm going to go ahead and answer this and say, just talk to each other. I feel like every time I work with a company, they always tell me, like marketing will tell me, oh, like sales doesn't want to work with us. They're not willing to hear our ideas. And then it's almost like some kind of tension is built up over time or something that may not be there anymore because it might not be the same people and leadership over there and things like that. So I'll try to go, and talk with sales as a marketing operations professional. And usually it goes over super well. Like usually they're excited. They're like, someone from marketing wants to talk to us and like hear what we have to say. And like, well, and it tends to be a very productive and positive conversation. So I think a big thing is just letting go of perceptions that may be false, maybe like historical or legacy relationships, and be open to hearing feedback. Doesn't mean that you have to actually do, anything related to the feedback if you feel like there's more of a conversation there, but at least be open to it. What do you guys think?
Totally agree. I think it's I think there's so much gold in the sales team's head. And, you can't replace that point of view they have of actually transacting and actually being where the rubber meets the road on how customers respond to the message, customers talking about how they found the company, what the experience was like, which content they engage with. I mean, they pick up so much. So I think, Sarah, like it's simple, but it's hard. It's one of those funny things, right? Like it's a basic idea to listen, to sit in on calls, to go be on the floor, to walk a mile in their shoes and pick up the phone and call a couple leads. But I think those things are the path to having that empathy and that understanding. And you just unlock so many insights that you don't get from, being in meetings and being on a whiteboard. And everybody says it, but few people do it. And this is true inside of a product organization as well, where I spend most of my time. Like we always talk about, we want to be on more customer calls. We want to spend more time on the front lines with the sales team, but people don't do that basic step of just make a habit, one call a week, Slack 3 reps every week and ask them a question. Simple stuff like that is where I would start.
Yeah. I think there's, so I'll represent the MarTech junkie here. I love all tools. And so I think there's like there's one tool and one strategy I want to put up forward. One is call recording tools like Gong or Chorus have made such a difference in my life these past, I'd say 2 years when it really became popular. The ability for like me to like listen to calls, put some trackers for some product feature keywords or some competitor keywords, and then listen to them, share those with my marketing team, have salespeople share with me pushback that they get from their customers. That has given me a window into what's really happening in a way that is summarized, condensed, and I can consume that I couldn't do at that scale before. So that is like, if you have a big enough like sales team, like 5, 6 minimum, like maybe 10, and you don't have a call recording tool, like go take one. It's just fantastic. Second thing I would say is alignment for me comes from getting overlapping KPIs. And so I think that maybe, I don't know if we have that question, but it brings me to a thought which I often have, which is, should marketers own revenue, or should they own pipeline? And if not, how should they be measured? My opinion is as close to revenue as possible if it's not revenue. And if you own, for example, pipeline, you're going to work with the sales team. If you own revenue, you're going to have to work with them. And that is the best thing. If everybody's aligned on one metric, which is revenue, there's no problem of like marketers sending like bad leads downstream, because they have no incentive to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think it's.
Oh, sorry, Sarah. The call recording is, I think, really important today. And I would take it a step farther to talk about marketing, sales, and customer success, and really think holistically about your go-to-market teams, and think about how you're not aligning, which aligning gives me the vision of you're standing next to each other side by side, but instead you're coming together in a partnership. And I always talk about, get your marketing and your sales and your customer success teams together in a circle, and any conversation that's going to be had, put in the middle of that circle your customer. And so that when marketing is talking to sales, or sales is talking to customer success, that you're having to actually look at your customer while you're having this conversation, so that you're thinking about things through the lens of your customer. And it's not this stand next to each other in a line like soldiers. And that just promotes the whole handoff, the handoff from marketing to sales, the handoff from sales to customer success. Instead, think about this as a circle, and think about this as a partnership and coming together, and really promote togetherness. The call recording, I think the most interesting call record to listen to is that first conversation that the onboarding, professional services, CS team, whomever it is, that first conversation when that customer has become a customer, they've signed the contract, and now it's gone from that sales relationship to that post-sales. What does that conversation look like? What are the moments where the customer is saying, I didn't understand that, or, oh, that's in line with what I heard? That conversation is one of the most critical, I think, that needs to be listened to for feedback, both to marketing and to sales, around what is that customer hearing when they're now officially contracted to pay us for our product or our service.
It's funny, Jill, I listen to those calls a lot in Gong, and I'm a big call recording fan, because it's the same thing. At that point, you almost get the sum total of the entire journey to that point when they spent the money, and like the bit flipped to closed won, and now you get to hear like what their expectations are versus what they bought versus what they think the onboarding is going to look like. I love that one. I'll say one more thing on call recording. I know we're all fans of it, but another way that it helps build that alignment is if you listen to a rep that did a great job on a call, like the easiest thing, if you're listening to the call anyway for insights, it's like the easiest way to just Slack message the rep and say, hey, you did a great job on that call. And then ask them a question about, hey, I know the customer asked this. Do you hear that often? So I think call recording is also a good way to like just build those relationships in a kind of hand-to-hand combat type way.
I think what's interesting about your answers is that it follows a trend that I see where a lot of businesses don't realize how much data they actually have. Like they don't necessarily take the time in to put in any kind of regulations around the data or any kind of standardization. And I think that that's a mistake, because a lot of that data they can use to make things better. So it's like, it's not really an unknown question. Like, how is the sales to customer success handoff going? Like that is an answer, or a question that you can answer. It's not an unknown. So I would encourage people to think about that too, that there is a lot of data where it's not opinion based. Like you don't have to have any kind of beef over people's opinion. You can really dive into what the data tells you. All right. I feel like this is a very topical question. How can we make our demand gen efforts more resilient or diversified? Actually, we clashed about this a little bit earlier, and Jill had a great point, which was to make sure that you check your ads, your nurtures, anything that's, kind of an evergreen campaign, because no matter what kind of business change you're going through, whether it's a merger or an acquisition or anything like that, that can be very confusing and alarming for customers and for prospects. If they get some kind of email that refers to the old company or some old product release or something like that. So definitely make sure that you check those things. I also would encourage everyone from my marketing operations perspective to look at your processes. Because again, taking the time up front to focus on data standardization, making sure everyone understands the data, where to find it, all of those things are going to help when everyone's panicked about other things. So definitely, I think those are some great ways to make sure that you guys can stay afloat as a company while kind of things around you may be a bit chaotic. What do you think, Adam?
I agree with what you said, and I'm a big fan of writing things down at a tactical level, and so few people do that. Like they have meetings upon meetings, and it's often so much more effective to just write a wiki post or a Google Doc or whatever you use, and codify these systems and these processes to be resilient. I also think that if you zoom out a level, that at uncertain times, and I don't know that this really hits on resiliency, but it hits on sort of the problem that you're trying to solve at big picture. In these uncertain times, I feel like you have to be more contrarian and lean in more to your unique things that you're doing. I think there's going to be a tendency for people to be super conservative and do everything that everybody else does. Oh, my event's canceled, so I need to do the virtual event the way that everybody else did. Where the reality is it's more important than ever to be contrarian, find the things that you do uniquely, and really lean in, double down, triple down on those things, because that's what's going to have an impact. That's what's going to rise you above the noise in these kind of unique circumstances.
I want to double on what Adam just said and give a few insights here. And I agree, you should differentiate. I'm seeing right now across my clients that the CPCs on Facebook, on AdWords are going up because a lot of the budget that was allocated towards events and other in-person stuff is being reallocated to virtual stuff, right? And everybody's doing that, but the audience is about the same, and so the CAC is going up, right? And at the same time, the CTR, the click-through rates are going down because people are distracted. Right, because now that you're on Facebook, you're reading all that news, and you're you may be freaking out, and so people are distracted.
You're trying to figure out where to find toilet paper.
Yeah, yeah. And so the performance of those things is worsening, and you've got to differentiate. All right, when the number of channels go down, which has been the case for many years, this is not a new thing. We've been having less and less channels. Right. And over the past couple of weeks, obviously, we lost some channels. Right. You got to create your own channels. Find ways to talk to your customers that your competitors are not leveraging. That's the only way that you can have a healthy acquisition. And the last thing I want to say is I always forecast multiple plans. Right. So I have a plan right now for one of my companies where it's things are bad for 3 months, but then recover. And that plan is us pushing forward because we have a lot of runway and so we're over-investing and try to grab market share. And we also have a plan of actually things are going to stay bad for more than 3 months, right? And what does that mean? And how do we measure that in the KPIs? And how do we operate under those two assumptions, right? And so you should think of what great looks like, what bad looks like, right?
Yeah, I'll add my defense on more resilient. I really think they need to be the better orchestrated. And so instead of thinking tactic, one channel, one tactic, think orchestration and think it across all of the different channels and all the different touch points. So I think the more human and the more helpful and the more handy you can be, and that your demand gen efforts are leading with value and making a deposit, if you will, to the potential buyer. And I think the more orchestrated across your marketing and your sales organizations, that's going to create more resiliency and better throughput, rather than just focusing on a single tactic or a single channel or a single product or a single message. Think more holistically and think more orchestration.
Yeah, I feel like what I'm hearing across the board in our answers is good planning, and then not making knee-jerk reactions. Like really trying to plan for, like G said, like best case, worst case, basically like almost like a catastrophe plan. And then just being careful about knee-jerking to like, oh, we can't spend any money, or let's spend all the money, or let's try to invest in like, something that just feels right in the moment, to really think it through, but to not necessarily back away from marketing and sales efforts.
Let me tell one quick story, because I was thinking about this. I live in Charleston, South Carolina now. I attended an angel investing group here, Venture South, and it was just 6 weeks ago that it was the founder and CEO of a early stage startup, and they have a product that essentially you put the device on the table in a restaurant, and the idea is that the patron can push the device for service. And imagine right now, it's a terrible time to be trying to sell this capability to restaurants that aren't even open. So they've had to do massive layoffs in that industry. So really think, wow, should I even be, calling into restaurants that are laying off all their employees and
trying to sell them something?
Yeah, exactly. So make sure you're thinking through, is this something that should I be selling at this point in time? And to the buyer, airline industries aren't investing in anything right now, except probably bankruptcy and debt refinancing and so forth. So I think you really need to think about from an industry perspective, should you be marketing to certain industries at this point in time?
I think there's that. And then I think also a lot of companies are trying to put out messages to reassure everyone that like everything's going to be okay and our employees are working from home. It's a lot of the repetitive messages. And so I think really thinking about, if you feel the need to send a message, what that says and what real ways you're offering to help. It's okay if you're not able to help, but if you do offer help, make it genuine, because I think it's a big turnoff. At least that's what I'm hearing from my peers, when we can kind of sniff out when things are fake. So definitely put some thought into that as well, who you're selling to. And then also, if you're able to offer help, that's great, do it, but make sure that it's in a way where you really can help. And it's not some kind of, I think someone called it virtue signaling yesterday that I saw. So yeah, try to not do that. On a brighter note, what new ideas, techniques, technologies are we most excited about for the next year? I would say, I would say Gong, honestly, which is like a weird answer for me. And I feel like we could not give them any more shout outs in the last few minutes. But yeah, I really like what they're doing there. I think the more kind of automated insights that we can get into what's going on out in the field, the better. I also really like Alice because I think we're seeing a shift to not, the old school direct mail. And so I like how also, and especially like their marketing group has incorporated being able to donate to kind of some of the coronavirus charities and efforts out there. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, on my side, I think I've been looking at content personalization for the past couple of years, and we've been pretty good at doing it in emails and web pages, and I'm starting to see it emerge also in automated personalized slides for AEs and automated videos, and so trying to deliver more value through new formats at scale is something that I'm looking a lot at. I think we're still at kind of the beginning of that technology. It's not perfect, but I see some companies where that enable you to connect your CRM data to a templated like Google slide deck, and it will like fill all of the slides like an email template, and you can then merge it into an email for your prospects so that the slides are more relevant. That's something I'm looking a lot at.
All right. Yeah, what about you, Adam?
Yeah, it's in a similar vein to what G's saying around personalization, but we have a video product at Drift that lets sales reps, customer success managers, BDRs record personal videos for prospects and customers. And that's been getting a lot of traction recently. And I think that medium is really exciting. And I think it's exciting because most people will not be comfortable doing it. So you're still at a point where if you're creative, if you're thinking about how to use video in your sales process, you will stand out with your buyer. So I think I'm really excited about that. I'm also excited about some of the stuff G said around personalization. Like the promise of personalization has just been talked about forever, but I don't think it's come true for most companies. So I think that right now it's super complex, and I'm excited about things that will make that easier in the coming years.
Yeah, I would just echo. I think it's been said. Personalization, video, 100%, more personalized video and more one-to-one human helpful video, and I would say anything really messaging related that's real time. And I look at a lot of the technologies that capture activity data. And what very few of them, if any of them, are doing is actually capturing some of the most interesting messaging that's happening. And that's still just, SMS text, right? So quick texting of your buyers, of your customers, messaging them through LinkedIn messaging or even Facebook messaging. Right? A lot more messaging apps and Slack, obviously, from a collaboration and team approach. But yeah, personalized and personalized all the way through. Personalized ads, personalized content on a landing page, personalized follow-up from the appropriate person. Yeah, I think personalization and that orchestrated throughout channel and throughout touch point, messaging, video, collaboration tools. We're going to see also, I think we'll probably see some virtual event companies, whether they're for all employee meetings or for events to bring your customers together, much more interactive event, virtual event companies as well.
All right. Awesome. I do see a lot of, I do want to mention all of these questions that we're asking were submitted by people attending the webinar, which is awesome, but I do see some live questions coming in as well. And I see a theme happening around intent data, which is interesting. So I think I'm going to pick out one of them. Is there a streamlined way to capture industry intent from different segments during these times? I think the thing to be careful about with intent data is looking at how the intent provider looks at intent data, for lack of a better way of saying it. I think some of them look at pure activity. So they'll say, are people searching these terms, going to these pages about these topics, but don't necessarily look at, potential install base and things like that. So say if like during this call, someone brings up Gong, but say if we say we hated Gong, and then everyone starts looking up what's Gong, doesn't necessarily mean that those are hot leads. They just heard something negative about the company. So I definitely would dig. I think a lot of folks aren't digging into how the intent data, how they're scoring things and how they're kind of building what they consider to be like a surge or a dip. So I think that's worth looking into. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
G has a million thoughts on this.
Yeah, I've been in that drum for a long time. I'm a big fan. Here's how I'd split it. I would say there's like first party, second party, and third party. The first party is like your own web properties. And so it's like measuring intent of people like hitting your web properties, like of domains or content that you own, and you can do like IP detection, and then it's pretty obvious, like people who come to your site, but you don't like raise their hand, they're not hand raisers, like it's really good, you own it, this is like what you should do first. If you're not looking at your anonymous visitors after this webinar, stop whatever you have and go do it. Okay. Then there's like the second party, like my friends at G2 Crowd and others. It's like they sell their traffic data, right? And it's still super clean. They can tell you also with like IP detection, like which are the companies coming to their site, to the pages that you have subscribed to, the category that you're interested in, and that's great, right? And so you can buy all of that. Also, second party will be people who are, I'd say, looking for public data on the web, like job openings, hires, and stuff like that. And then you have the third parties, so like the Bomber and stuff, who are like partnering with like other news producers and who are doing what Sarah's talking about, which is like intent detection through like topical analysis. When I think through those three, as an intent buyer, and I buy a lot of intent data these days, I'm always thinking, can I QA it? Can I verify myself that this thing's legit, right? And so like when I go to a G2 Crowd page and I see my company name in the stream, I'm like, okay, I understand how this works, right? When I post a job opening and the intent data provider like pushes that back to me in a CSV or JSON or whatever, right? I say, okay, I understand they crawl the page and they structure that data, right? The third party is like, it's a bit messy because like it could be bogus, I don't know, right? So it's really hard to QA. So I usually stay clear of the third party, but I definitely buy whatever is needed to enable the first and second party intent data.
That's great. And then I also think something that kind of loops into that is even once you pick the right intent data, unfortunately, none of them seem to have API connections, which makes things tricky because how do you then best surface the data and keep it up to date and things like that? So that's somewhere where I would love to see some more development on their end. So a lot of them just pass over like a flat file, which makes me feel very old school compared to a lot of the other tools that we have. But yeah, definitely agree. Getting into the details on what exactly intent data is and not just kind of, skimming the surface is key to making sure that it actually is legit and will serve you well. I see Adam thinking. Do you have any thoughts?
You guys, I'm just enjoying this. I could let you and G talk about intent data all day and I'll take notes.
Yeah, I would say in terms of like if I could classify like which ones you should go after, like I said, like IP detection, G2 is great. Also, there's one which has always worked for me. It's job openings. Like most of us here are selling like software, like B2B stuff, and so most of us we have like generally like a buyer, an executive buyer, and when there is a new executive person for whatever role you're selling to, that person comes with budget and decision power. Right? And when that person is hired to make changes, right? You're not hiring an executive to tell them, no, you're not going to change anything, right? So being able to know that you have a new executive within the scope of the role that you sell to has always been very successful, always. That's one. And the second intent data that I love is, and that I've actually built at Drift and other places, is look for your successful customers, the people that have a high NPS on your product and that move on. And we're in tech, which means we have about like 20% turnover in our customer base, like user base, like every year, right? And tech people stay in tech; they don't go like farming potatoes, right? And so, like, you gotta follow them. Like, they like your product, they know your product, the sale is already done. Like, try to figure out when they leave, where they go. As soon as possible, send them a nice gift. We were talking of Sendozo earlier. I also love Sendozo. I used Sendozo when I was at Drift to send them headsets in the first 2 weeks after they joined a new company. Say, hey, thanks for loving us at your previous company. Congrats for the new gig. Let us know when you're ready to have a conversation. That's it. And you don't need to push. They already know your product. That's it. That was low volume, very high conversion.
Yeah, I would say, sorry, Sarah, I would say, if you're going to invest in the intent data, in buying the intent data or investing in systems to track the intent data, make that data actionable, right? So ensure that there's workflow that is set up to notify the salesperson that Peter Herbert has left Full Story and joined Mural. Like he that's a guy I know. He's big, huge MarTech guy. He's early adopter and a lot of tech that, any MarTech company, they want to know Peter. They want to work with Peter. Well, Peter posts on LinkedIn that he left Full Story just for Mural as the CMO. So instead of just going to his profile and saying congrats, what is it that you could actually say that would that cut through the noise of the 50 generic congrats messages? Is there something that you could say that would stand out to Peter? Is there something that you can send him? Is there, but make that intent data very actionable. And so it needs to feed into your systems and your workflows. Don't just buy the data and then not make it actionable.
I think something else too that kind of goes in line with that is when, like G, as you mentioned, when people leave your tech or move on to something different, I think something that I've seen some vendors do, I think pretty successfully, is leverage personal relationships to get in touch to figure out why that person left. So, and I feel like that's a pretty easy thing to do in terms of, like, people are generally willing to tell why they were unhappy with a product, but it's a good way to get kind of an unfiltered piece of feedback that can help you understand, what kind of turned that person off. So I think leveraging like personal relationships too, it's not all about automating everything. I think you can automate things like directionally to get, have an idea of where to prioritize one-to-one efforts, but one-to-one definitely beats some kind of algorithm or website activity.
Well, and just with G's point, I loved it when Megan Eisenberg would leave one company and join another one when I was at Eloqua, because I knew that meant, she'd be bringing Eloqua into her new organization. But on the flip side, what it also meant is when your strong champion leaves an existing company, you have attrition risk. So what are you doing to make sure that, yes, you're running to Megan to get the new logo because she's joined a new company, but what are you doing to make sure that the company where Megan left is in a solid state with your technology, that they're not going to turn it off because the big champion has now left the building?
Yeah, and I think when you go down that path, it just shows how important it is to have more than one champion in every account. And we always talk to them expand, but like before the expand, like having more than one champion like makes a churn. Like if you have multiple teams using you, makes a churn almost impossible because those teams need to agree on leaving your software, right? And it kind of prevents that situation. So always strive to have more than one champion.
Definitely.
100%.
All right, so let's move to our next segment, hip or hype. So we're running up on time a little bit here, so let's keep it to hip or hype, and then up to 3 sentences as to why. So we will start with CDP. Jill, what do you think, hip or hype?
I think it's hip. I think it's what brings it all together. I think with so many disparate tools and technologies and databases and data models, you actually need to have one single customer data repository, that customer data platform that brings it all together. Now, I can't speak to each of the individual vendors in the space and whether they're hip or hype, but I do think
there are too many to mention.
Yeah, too many to mention, but I think it's important to have a strategy around it. And this is where I think looking at your relationships with the analyst firms is important. So whether you're a Serious Decision / Forrester customer, or a Topo customer, or an IDC customer, or whomever you're using for your advice around your roadmap for MarTech, sales tech, customer success tech, put it all together and you get your RevTech stack. Like, I would really be leveraging those analyst relationships to understand what they're hearing and what they're seeing as it relates to these big waves that we're seeing come. But definitely CDP is hip, and you need to have a strategy around it.
All right, definitely agree. G, what do you think?
Oh, I mean, I'm a Segment fan. I worked at Segment, so like
Loaded question.
Yeah, loaded question. I don't see how a modern marketing team would succeed without some kind of a CDP, right? Without some kind of orchestration. You would be like, I would be hard pressed. Like, if you're still in the old world and you have like customer databases and files like all over the place, like, you're not going to compete. Like, we're in a world of like very like razor thin like efficiencies, and we're trying to compete with like very efficient organizations. If you're using the technologies and the tools of yesterday, I don't see how you're going to win. So for me, this is like, you need to have one. I don't even see how you could succeed without one.
I'll be contrarian. I think there's a lot of hype. I think it's unclear how the category shakes out. I wouldn't even known to call Segment a CDP, and like, I follow this stuff, so that's like news to me. I'm like, wow, they're a CDP. I don't know where the lines are between journey orchestration and CDP, and then I need my data store with all these tools like Tray and MuleSoft on top of that. So I'm not really sure what like the modern layers of the stack are. So I'll put it in hype for now until I can figure it out.
I know, I feel torn about it too. I think it's hip for the CDPs that are actually CDPs, and that's really like their bread and butter of the tool. Whereas I think you see a lot of ABM platforms and other folks trying to like be like almost like a part of a CDP and call it CDP, and that's where a lot of the hype is coming in. We call that vaporware. It's like, it sounds great until you actually get your hands on it and you're like, this is just a database. This is not a CDP. So I think definitely the key is looking into the details on, is it a bread and butter CDP where you're able to integrate with all your different platforms and really orchestrate in the way that, we've talked about really needing to do? Or is it more of just trying to centralize data, but not in any real way where you can connect all the different tools together? All right, this one ought to be good, because I know a lot of folks on here have different tools and vendors that they work with who use AI. So I'll start with you, G. What do you think of AI, hip or hype?
So it's interesting because like, I think like we need to define like what is AI, and then find out like when are the good use cases for AI. Because like, technically, if you read the Wikipedia description, actually like a rule-based engine is AI, but it's not machine learning. So contrary to what most people think, like machine learning is like more advanced than AI, because the machine is learning by itself, whereas AI can just be anything the machine does on its own with human rules or training. That said, so if we think of like AI, like the machine learning component of AI, very few tools who say they have AI actually have AI. Right? There's like, they have stuff which is like, so there's somebody's going to like create rules or like kind of like a branching tree diagram, which has consequences, but the machine is not learning on its own. Right? So
it's a Wizard of Oz effect. I saw this great tweet a while ago that was like, every time I hear AI and I dig into it, it's almost like I pull a curtain and they're the people frantically trying to put it together.
100%. And so, however, there are some platforms and there are some use cases for AI which are fantastic. And I know Adam's going to talk of chat, and that's a good use case where you have like all the use cases of AI are use cases where you have a lot of volume. You have a little signal, so little conversions, right? And you're trying to automate something which would be very boresome for a human. That's the good use case, right? So large volume of conversation, that's a good one. People who do like help desk with like handling tickets on inbound, like say on the e-commerce side, companies doing like automation of like the question like, where's my order? When can I return some stuff, like detecting that is also use case, right? But you shouldn't get too crazy. Like people who say, oh, this thing like builds content automatically for your customers and like writes English. Like there's no such thing for the moment, and we won't have such thing for some time. Like content writers and designers are not going to be replaced by AI for like some serious time.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think there's a lot of kind of faux AI that's out there. I think it's become almost like the CDP term, where everyone tries to kind of appropriate it to their own tool. I think that when you see it in action, it's really powerful. Yes. But I will say, when you see it in action, it's very powerful. But a lot of it does really come down to machine learning, and you do need humans to do it. So there's no such thing, in my opinion, as like a set it and forget it AI.
Yeah. And I want to give a shout out to a small platform called MonkeyLearn. You want to check it out. It's actually an AI platform for marketers. So you can actually train your own models. So you can upload a CSV, connect a growth sheet, connect like your CRM, get the data, train your model yourself, and then deploy the model to an API. And that is useful case for AI, where you can create a small model that is personalized to your business problem. That works really well. And I've used it a couple of times to identify like intent in responses to my outbound emails, to detect intent in my NPS responses, stuff like that.
Hey, I think you did cut out actually right when you said the brand name, at least for me. So I want to make sure.
MonkeyLearn. The monkey learns. MonkeyLearn. Yeah. Yeah, I'm a great monkey. I got kids.
All right, Adam and Jill, any thoughts on AI?
I know we're short on time, so I will just say HIP, because I think that it can be the new paradigm. We've been in SaaS for 20 years, and I think AI and RPA will bring forth just a new way, a new model of delivering solutions, and it will change the way that we work as vendors and as buyers. So I will say HIP.
Yes, definitely. And I feel like, just to wrap up that one, that also aligns really well with our statement about evergreen content. Anything that's automated, make sure that if your situation changes as a company, that you are building that into either the logic or retraining the machine learning, whatever it may be, definitely. And with that, I will hand it back to Karen Burka, our On24 administrator.